Hello, welcome to Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Mark Kate.
And I'm Chad Lott.
This is episode 83. We're going to be talking about It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, directed by Bill Melendez and written by Charles M. Schulz, of course, from 1966. You can email us at whatthe@scarythoughts.org. And let's just get right to it. Spoilers ahead, though I don't know how much that could possibly apply to The Great Pumpkin.
If you were alive today and remember television last year, you have seen this.
Yes, but apparently it got dropped from network television last year and got picked up by Apple Plus. Like the network that has been broadcasting it forever. Not the original network, the almost current network. They just didn't care anymore and we're going to drop it. I guess it's declining in utility.
Yeah, it's kind of sad seeing that like television liturgical calendar kind of fall apart a little bit.
Yeah.
There are different shows that basically frame the year. You know, for me, Christmas is bigger than Halloween, so A Christmas Story is my big one.
For sure.
I definitely have seen this one quite a few years.
Yep.
I'm sure there's an Easter one.
Is there?
10 Commandments, I think they usually play around Easter.
God, I don't know. I've never been in a household that was Christian enough to have rituals around Easter other than hunts.
Yeah, you go look for the eggs. And then, like New Year's Eve has the ball dropping ceremony. So it's where we do sit and absorb culture from.
Culture.
Yeah.
So where do you want to start with this?
Well, did you grow up with this or no? Some people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
to frame it a little bit, which is kind of shocking to me, this came out like just before I was born. This is almost contemporary with my childhood. And I think that when I realized that this last week, before we were going to cover it, really made me realize, like, I don't really relate to stuff from my childhood so much anymore. Like, this feels so fucking ancient, and then realizing that so am I. This just looks embarrassingly old.
Real reckoning, huh?
Yeah, it hurt.
Yeah. I was reminded of, like, how many things... Like, I hadn't seen this in a long time, so I didn't really remember as much as I thought. But every single scene, I remember reenacting something from it. Like the dog lips thing. Yep. Like, our dogs would always try to lick our faces. And whenever that happened, I would say, ugh, dog lips.
Right.
I definitely tried to use a blanket as a whip to open things. Just
Really?
see if it would work. Like,
Yeah.
I would always want to try out shit I saw on TV, like in totally destructive ways. That... definitely didn't try to like fly a biplane around in the yard with a scarf. None of that nonsense.
The thing that struck me the most on rewatching it, and it had been a long, long time since the last time I saw it. Yeah, I did remember a lot of it, but I didn't remember how boring and depressing it actually is. It is glacially slow, and I don't mean slow compared to Tim and Eric or something like that. I mean like even slow for its time. And then it's really depressing. Like, everyone loses. The only person who seems to be having a good time is Lucy, and she's a mean person.
Cruel matriarch of the Peanuts gallery.
Yeah. It ends with Sally disappointed. Charlie Brown gets rocks. Linus loses and just starts screaming at Charlie Brown, and then the credits roll over that.
Yeah. And then Snoopy, clearly bipolar post-traumatic stress disorder from his imaginary time in the war.
I don't know if we should talk about Snoopy right away, but
there's a real Jacob's Ladder thing going on there.
You know, it's funny. I had Jacob's Ladder in my notes and I deleted it and wasn't going to bring it up. How do you mean it?
Well, I mean it is that there's basically this war dream sequence that happens in the middle of it, which may or may not have happened. I mean, who is this dog 50 years old? Who knows? I mean, like, that's the other thing that's so interesting to me is that it's an artifact of World War I, not World War II. And even by the 60s, World War I was sort of considered the forgotten war. Like, people didn't remember it as much as World War II for obvious reasons. I mean, World War II is like the blockbuster, you know, it's like Evil Dead 2 versus Evil Dead or something like that.
I just think it's really weird. I don't understand Snoopy. I don't understand the draw. He takes up about a quarter of this special, and he doesn't really do anything. Like, it's a Halloween special, but he is a pilot who gets shot over France and then ends up at a Halloween party.
Mm-hmm.
What? Also, everything in this universe seems to be such that it's all very real, it's all very materialist, but Snoopy is not. Snoopy is completely in a fantasy land, and it does beg the question, is it all a fantasy of Snoopy's, or is Snoopy a fantasy of the children's? Yeah. He also is a very inconsistent character because he starts off being very kind and affectionate, and then he's goes off and fights a war, and then he's a prankster, and he mocks kids sometimes. His dance sequence at the piano, like Snoopy's not a character. He's just a fill-in for whatever Charles M. Schultz seems to want him to be a fill-in for. And I guess at the time that was funny.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, the comedy ages badly, so
Yeah.
this might have been a laugh riot at the time. And think about like how beatnik the soundtrack is. It's just like I just imagine these like aging artist beatniks being like, "Yeah, man," like just adding all this weird, which now is wonderful sounding. Like you listen to the soundtrack, and it's like
Soundtrack's amazing. It does remind me of the Mr. Rogers ethos of treating children like they're intelligent and give them complicated music instead of simplistic music.
Yeah. Let's see. The big quote, I guess we'll get right to that, is what Linus says. 3 things I've learned never to discuss with people: religion, politics, and the great pumpkin. And I think that is a great way to live life.
It is not how we live now.
Yeah, people are chumps now.
Everybody wants to talk about politics. And I mean, I think by religion, at the time that this came out, probably meant if you're Protestant or Catholic. But at this point, it seems that
if I have to hear about your fucking crystals, Jesus Christ.
Or astrology, or social justice, or QAnon. These are all religions. These are all cults. These are all things that completely define a worldview, such that it's not even really politics anymore. It stands in for what religion used to mostly do, I think.
Yeah, well, instead of having like a culture with a unifying mythology, we're basically a bunch of really terrible fan fictions stitched together and overlaid over each other.
Yeah.
And like fan fiction, it's all terrible.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this special really is about belief. One of the central pieces is the recurring gag that was throughout the Peanuts of Charlie Brown not being able to kick the football when Lucy pulls it away, which I think in the comic strip was always illustrating a different point.
Yeah.
But in this one, it's just a really, really long lead up to the very thin gag of it wasn't notarized. Mwah, 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 mwah.
Yeah.
But that is about his belief, about him.
Well, he believes in the state.
Nice.
And because of that, he's a fool and unhappy.
Sweet. But the overall thing about this special that is interesting and endearing is that Linus has this belief system. And you and I are both coming off of reading Eric Davis's High Weirdness and thinking about the liminal spaces between belief and conspiracy and psychedelic poetic truths. And I think this fits in there because it's so easy to just go like, well, he believes in something that's absolutely fucking untrue. It doesn't exist. But that's what belief is. And I think we're really, in the last many years, coming to understand what constitutes belief. There are so many studies about understanding why people believe and how they believe. And this special illustrates one point about belief, that if your belief is disproven, you're more likely to double down than to admit you were the fool. And that's what Linus does, is his beliefs never manifest in anything. And so he just fucking goes on a tear yelling about his unwavering belief in the Great Pumpkin at Charlie Brown.
Yeah, and he like locates his abandonment by God on himself, when he says, "Oh, one little crack like that, and the great pumpkin might not even show up." So he's like identified his own like pumpkin sin.
That's one of the commandments.
Yeah. Also, like the idea that like other people, like, okay, so he has the sincerest pumpkin patch. It's the most sincere pumpkin patch.
Yes.
And then as people come to it and pollute it with their capitalist candy grabbing, like it becomes a less sincere pumpkin patch. And so then you could imagine that, these infidels have come and sullied the spirit of his pumpkin patch. So there's all kinds of ways it could go bad.
Yeah. No, the whole line about sincerity, which he repeats 3 or 4 times, I think is really interesting, that he has kind of created sacred or consecrated ground somehow that he's hoping is good enough. Yeah. One question it really begs for me is, how did this start? Like, that's, of course, it with any mythology, like there are a million questions begged, but I want to know, how did he get this one into his head? Like, I don't believe in Santa. I believe in the Great Pumpkin. He brings presents. He's less popular, but he is actually true. Santa is not.
Yeah. There's far fewer articles about this than you might expect. Like, I went around looking for the usual, like, 10 things you didn't know about Great Pumpkin, and like there's really just not much to know. But like one of the things Charles Schultz said when he was asked about how does belief play in this, he's like, oh, sometimes kids just get it wrong and it's kind of funny. And so it appears as if it might be simply as simple as Linus is a moron and he's confused Christmas with this Halloween thing. And what's kind of funny about that, it's like, okay, well, what is his concern? His concern is being like sort of faithful, and then also reward that he's going to get. Like the Great Pumpkin's going to bring toys to all the good boys and girls. And that's like, prosperity gospel basically. So, and he's in the way that like capitalism has merged all these holidays together is like just really just bottom line holidays. He's sort of doing that. Like he's mixed these holidays up and it kind of doesn't matter. I guarantee at this point in time, if enough companies thought that they could have a Great Pumpkin holiday and it would make more money, it would. The famous example is like Valentine's Day is kind of not a real holiday.
Yeah. Or Kwanzaa.
Kwanzaa is just
completely make something up from scratch.
Yeah.
Good on you.
Yeah. See if they catch on. That one hasn't caught on too hard yet.
It really didn't.
No.
I feel like Kwanzaa is something that like woke white people include in their list of things to wish people a happy.
Well, it's so misunderstood, and then there's some like conspiracy around the guy like having started it, maybe having worked with the FBI. So there's a little bit of mistrust with it in some circles. And then other people just don't know how to take it, because it's not really commodified in the way that other holidays are.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I would think that to the lack of success of Kwanzaa and the Great Pumpkin, it needs something to accelerate it, and capitalism accelerates everything pretty damn well.
Yeah, I mean, like there's Christmas shit in Target right now.
Yeah.
That's accelerant.
Have you been watching The Vow, or did you? Season 1's over.
No, I've been trying to like get off the TV completely.
Jesus. How empty your life must be.
I mean, I saw the season finale of The Boys, so that was pretty much
that was
enough
pretty
for
good.
me. Yeah.
But The Vow, it's just, another expose of a cult, but it is another example of, it's kind of a capitalist enterprise plus sex slaves.
Yeah.
But merciless self-actualization through profit is definitely why it became as big and powerful as it was. Well, it was also funded by a rich lady, but...
Yeah. Speaking of rich ladies, the cruel matriarch of the town, Lucy, one of the things I really love is when they're putting their costumes together and they're like, you should have something on that's the opposite of you. And then she puts on the witch face. She's an asshole. Like, so like,
fully.
and like, this isn't like the contemporary sexy witch where this is like witch or mean witch. It's just kind of funny that that's just there. The thing that's so weird about Peanuts to me is there's all these things dropped around that are supposed to be sort of like moralisms, but Charlie Brown is shit on the whole fucking time. There's no redemption for him. He never wins. Like he's like almost in Parks and Rec, they have the Jerry character.
Yeah.
It's like that, but he doesn't get to be the mayor of the town married to Christy Brinkley. Like I've never understood Charlie Brown as a character or the appeal. Is it's a person who like, are you supposed to empathize with him? If so, isn't reading Peanuts just an endless catalog of horrors for this poor kid?
It is. And it is not just about him being the butt of the joke of other kids. The I have a rock, that's adults. That is adults giving a child a rock. Collectively, the whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's dark and totally unacceptable.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
Unless it's some sort of like rare earth mineral and it's actually pretty cool.
You seem like you would be interested in obsidian. Here you go.
Well, that's not rare enough. But, you know,
It's beautiful. It's
I guess
dragon
so.
glass.
And then they use his head to model a pumpkin. The total disrespect.
It's fucked. You know, I'm very curious. Obviously, concepts arise when they, long after they need to. What was the consciousness around bullying in 66?
I mean, I think you just like did it.
Right.
You know?
It's a rougher time.
Yeah, I think it's like pretty much like everybody's like Scott Farkas in A Christmas Story, just running around like, see? Like just trying to wreck kids.
But what about their self-esteem? I'm really worried about Charlie Brown.
Well, I mean, like to me, that seems exactly how you make a serial killer.
I'm trying to think, does he do anything wrong in this episode? I mean, at the very end, to his credit, trying to give sympathy to Linus when he's like, nah, I did stupid stuff when I was a kid too, or whatever he says. I guess rubbing the word stupid across your friend can be triggering, but...
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's really the shame about Linus is not only has he ruined his night, he's ruined other people's nights. He's ruined Sally's Halloween.
That's her business. He didn't coerce her.
I mean,
anything.
she's clearly in love with him.
Yeah.
You know, and then...
But I don't think he used that. I think he's mostly oblivious to that.
Yeah, a little bit. But then, I don't know. It's like, that to me is the problem, is when your weird belief, like, I kind of don't care what anybody believes, but I do care when their belief infects someone else with nonsense that's bad for them. Like, that to me is the beginning of criminal. You know,
What about passing it on to one's children?
Oh, just as bad. I mean, if you give your kids a bunch of stupid ideas, and everybody does, like, that's how people parent, unless you like get into some bullshit Montessori nonsense or something at some point, and then your children become just completely untamable finger painters.
Wait, what were we talking about a minute ago? Sally,
I don't know.
Linus.
What else? I mean, this thing's only 24 minutes. Like, there's not a whole lot to dig into. I mean, this is mostly our excuse to do something for Halloween.
Yeah, let's be very on the table. We were like, we gotta get a Halloween episode out, and everyone I said, I think we're doing The Great Pumpkin next. We're delighted to hear that we were covering this. But now that we are, I don't know how much there is to talk about.
Well, it's something I've been thinking a lot about, like kind of the general direction of our show and the specter of Glenn Danzig's Veronica over our show, where I've been thinking a lot about us in the overall horror space, and then what horror is, and then what a type of show like this is. And to me, the idea of doing this is really more like memoir than anything else. It's like kind of us expressing who we are as people more than really investigating these films terribly deeply, I don't think.
I think our whole philosophy culture thing is more a reflection of what you and I are interested in than as if we're going to approach these texts the way Partially Examined Life approaches Spinoza or something like that.
Yeah, totally. But where I'm getting at is this is just a thing from our childhoods, and it's almost difficult to unpack it the same way you would unpack something or even shit on something new.
Fully.
But I don't know that necessarily would give it a pass. Like, I'm trying to think about if I watched this right now, I had never seen it, what I would think about it. Like, that's kind of something I think about a lot when we do these classic movies. And I mean, this seems like it's got enough arty pretension to maybe pass. You know, the French countryside scenes look very cool. There's a lot of really neat music transitions. But
there's not a lot of text, and I don't mean dialogue. I mean, it's short, but really more than half of it is just a 40-second scene that is about 1 weak punchline. And that punchline doesn't necessarily lend itself to a story or to an idea or really reflect something about the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only thing I can think of that reflects the time from these gags is that so much of the humor is derived from, it seems to me, I don't know, I would love to ask someone in 1966 how funny this was, but it seems like a lot of the jokes are that it's a kid using adult language.
Mm-hmm.
So they're having their petty childhood grievances and concerns, and then they'll suddenly come out with something like it wasn't notarized. And the
Mm-hmm.
joke is that it's a child talking about notarization. I can't think of other examples, but it seemed to me that there's a lot of that, like a kid using a $5 word.
Yeah, I
And
wonder.
it's hilarious because kids don't talk that way. Just like that's a dog. A dog doesn't have an imagination. That's hilarious. Like, I
Yeah,
don't know.
I wonder if it's like the equivalent of like in a modern sitcom, like an SNL sort of thing, where they're just using a phrase from the time that was kind of a big one. You know, like
Yeah.
"Can you hear me now?" Like or something goofy like that.
Yep.
Like if these were like that, but then it's also like how much of it is ripped right out of the syndicated comic strip too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a thing that I think Peanuts still runs probably in places.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's got to be like 270 years by now. I think it was originally written in cuneiform.
What else have we got? So what's up with Snoopy? Like what is your understanding of what his popularity is based upon?
I would say that Snoopy is arguably more popular than Charlie Brown.
Sure.
Yeah, and I like Uniqlo as early as last year had a whole Snoopy thing. Like you see that character cross up in cross promotions with brands even to this day. Like I think there were Vans had like some Snoopy Vans like not that long ago.
But at some point isn't having just Snoopy on a thing, is it really Snoopy anymore, or is it just a recognizable, like it could be a fake Gucci sweater, it could be
May as well be Supreme.
a Misfits
Yeah,
t-shirt or a Supreme t-shirt, like it's just sort of a thing
yeah.
and whatever. Like when someone has a t-shirt and it's slightly ripped and it's got some sort of army number stencil on it, like it's just a vague signifier at not much.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, think about like Hello Kitty. To my knowledge, there's no Hello Kitty story. Like, I don't think there was ever. There might be some game or something now that walks out something, but to my knowledge, like for most of its existence, it was just a cat,
Yeah.
and there wasn't anything else to it. I don't know. Maybe people just liked it for some reason. I have no idea. I even looked up a little bit, and I'm sure there's some psychos out there. Like, there's a museum of this shit just up the road. So, I mean, I guess we could have probably gone there and done some primary research, but I mean, it's COVID, so that's an excuse.
I guess it's on our listeners to email us and tell us what's up with Snoopy.
Yeah, I don't.
Or if listeners, if you like Snoopy, explain. I'm very curious.
Yeah, yeah. I'd also like curious, like what's, why this extended like weird war dream sequence in the middle of this thing. It's like very unlike the rest of it. It's not like we get to see Lucy flying over the town on a broom, or any of the other kids doing, or like how they became ghosts, or whatever.
Nope.
You know.
Nope.
Yeah, I think I might be at the end of my powers for Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown.
So what would be a better Halloween mythology?
Well, off mic, we talked about how like Trick or Treat kind of nails it. That there's just this vengeful,
The movie Trick or Treat.
yeah, like there's just this vengeful spirit of Halloween that demands you keep some arbitrary rules, and then will execute you if you don't keep it. But I like the idea of some sort of like children's revenge thing, like where they're able to like hunt down and kill the weakest of their own, or some pervert in the neighborhood or something like that. For each Halloween, there's like almost like a purge thing.
Purge via kids.
Like the game in the movie.
Yeah, that's good. This runs alongside Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, which is a remarkable movie. But if
It's got
kids,
a lot of hipster cred right now. I haven't seen it in fucking years. I don't remember a thing about it, but everybody seems to be tweeting about it.
oh really? It's
Yeah.
just it's a bad movie. It's really bananas, it's more cartoonishly comedic and fails on every level so badly that it's really riveting in the way
See,
it's like The Room or Birdemic or Troll
Yeah.
2. It's like it's not far from those.
I've been thinking a lot about those types of movies lately because, like, now, if somebody told me, like, oh, you got to watch this, it's so bad, it's good, I could give a fuck. Like, I don't want to see that. But when I was younger, I saw a lot of that kind of stuff. And I was thinking about, like, it might just be the way that it's consumed. Like, say you're a kid, it's Friday night, you ordered some Domino's pizza, it's like 1992, and you get to go and you have just enough money for like one, maybe two movies. Like, that's it for like 2 days. You know, that's what you get. So you would go and pick something, and maybe you had heard something was crazy or funny or whatever. I would watch a movie like 3 or 4 times while I had it rented, just because I was like, I'm paying for it, gonna get my money's worth. And you would just run it in the background while you were goofing off and playing D&D or whatever. And so I feel like in the way that you would listen to albums like that a long time ago, where you would sit with your album that you had bought, and that might be the only one you had for a couple of weeks, like, and you would really, really get to know it. Now, if I watch something like that, like, it passes in and out completely. Like, the last thing I watched like that was probably The Room. And it was only because I liked The Disaster Artist so much. Like, I'd seen The Disaster Artist before I saw The Room.
Right. I feel like we are committed to covering the movie Verotica, so I don't want to cover this territory too densely in advance of that episode. But because I'm invested in art, I'm invested in questions of what makes it engaging, what makes it communicate, what is successful about it, and what fails within the piece. And for me, it's just about, is it interesting? And some things fail so spectacularly that they are very, very interesting.
But I don't think those things are like failures. Like, to me, failure is like something's wrong with the craft. Not that like it's a completely unchecked, weird point of view that's totally insane. Like, I think that, like, when you watch The Room, there's not like the same types of like actual, like, I would fire that gaffer type mistakes that you see in Verotica.
Right, but it's these movies that are so bad they're good. It's usually a failure of vision. That the people most in charge don't see that it is not working, but are full steam ahead as if it is.
Something else I was thinking about these so bad they're good movies is quite a few of them are hyper violent. Like, a lot of them. Like, they're either like action movies or horror movies. Like, those are the ones that you really think of as being like fucking bonkers. And I think for a long time, if you wanted to see some like edge pushing action that was totally like comic book level crazy, that's what you got. But now I think like movies like The Boys, for example, has completely bonkers, like early Peter Jackson level gags in it.
Yes.
And it's high quality too. So like, now that you've seen a supervillain whose power is his dick gets really long and chokes people done really well, how does that terrible, like, low budget tentacle version of that succeed?
Oh, for sure. Well, I think that part of the cycle of art is always that there is some level of ineptitude cycling around. And then at some point, usually about 8 to 15 years later, that gets picked up as an aesthetic. Lo-fi hip-hop. Although it's using very current techniques, it's referring to junky old cassettes in a certain way. There's a lot of ways in which it is absolutely not. But like I mentioned Tim and Eric earlier, Tim and Eric's source for humor often depends on older, really, really shitty video effects. And they've taken ineptitude with video effects and made it the central voice of a lot of their humor.
Yeah, to me though, that's bordering on being a nostalgic prop comic. Like,
ouch.
Yeah, I mean, because you're using this like external thing, like a rubber chicken. You're using like a weird lens flare or whatever to make the joke happen. And then that's not necessarily bad. That's more like a retromania kind of thing, I think, than lo-fi hip hop, for example, is you have like a genius like the RZA has what he has and makes something that no one could have ever made before with it. Whereas like the opposite, and like something that would be terrible, would be like you go buy RZA beats off of off of some site, and then
Yeah.
you make those, and then whatever you have made is shittier, and then maybe you make some gonzo emo core rap album with it that is just fucking atrocious, but people like it on YouTube because it's so terrible.
I guess I'm referring to something. Okay, another example of what I'm talking about is like maybe 15 years ago, comedy, movies and TV, the edgier stuff started mining awkwardness. And part of that awkwardness is the bad edit or the take that goes on too long. And it's sort of self-referential. It's sort of a nostalgic nod to bad TV from the 80s or something, right?
Well, we're back to that David Foster Wallace essay about irony in television. Like, it's right back to that. It's like it just privileges the viewer with being in on it, and aren't you so smart because you can sneer at this thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But then it becomes a dominant voice where it's not even irony anymore. It's just the pace of the thing itself.
Well, it's insincere sneering. It would definitely drive the Great Pumpkin off.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad we got full circle eventually. Should we move on to mail?
Yeah, let's move on to mail.
All right.
Fuck this pumpkin.
All right.
Boomer ass cartoons that we've had to live with for decades.
All right. So John from Portugal first asked about our newsletter. We've kind of hit the pause button on the newsletter, and that's why we have not lately been asking people to sign up for it. To be quite frank, it just seemed like the click-through rate was really, really low, and you and I put a lot of time and care into it. Like, it actually took a lot of time, and then like 2 people would click a link, and it was like,
Yeah.
it's not an effective use of my time, but we might bring it back.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought much about that one way or the other. I never looked at the metrics for it, but for me, I just I write newsletters and shit all day at work. So
Right.
even a fun one, I just keep letting it slip.
Right.
But was the question, should we bring it back, or where the fuck is it?
Oh, no, no. He just wanted to get on the list and said, actually, a few people have said, I haven't seen the newsletter in a while. I don't think I'm getting it. And we haven't been doing it for a while, but it's not gone forever.
A lot of times too, it reflects our current interests, and my interests have been fairly antisocial as of late. And so I don't feel like sharing them with the world.
But John did say, would love to see a self-help for nihilists take on a Jodorowsky book. Really been enjoying the podcast, especially in quarantine. I'm game.
The 2 books I would recommend us to look at are his book Psychomagic, which is kind of like his take on metaphysics, which is pretty badass. It's basically like Jodorowsky Chaos Magic Manual. So
cool.
It's kind of cool. Okay. And then the other one is The Spiritual Journey of Jodorowsky, which is pretty much a real like Carlos Castaneda style book about the various women who have initiated him into various esoteric practices and how they all stitch together and form his own sort of thing.
Oh, wow.
That I think might be the most autobiographical of the things of his I read.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should reach out to Stephen Intermill.
Oh,
see if this is something he wants to.
That would be a
join us on.
killer idea.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll keep that in the back pocket, y'all.
Yeah, I believe he's like pretty knowledgeable on the Castaneda side of stuff too. I mean, obviously he has a cool witchcraft museum, so he knows all kinds of rad shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be pretty fun.
Okay, next email. Jaron writes, I've been a regular listener of your podcast for the last few years. Always enjoy hearing your thoughts on pretty much anything. I was just curious if you two were continuing your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training during the pandemic. I'm an East Bay resident and have been training on and off for the last few years. I had just started at a new school right before the shutdown, and they have pretty much gone silent during this time. Just curious what other people in the Bay Area are doing. Thanks so much. Hope you and your loved ones are doing well. Me and my loved ones are doing great. Thanks for the well wishes. Mm-hmm. You too, Jaron. Yeah. So shall I go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So I quit Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. God, was it a year ago now? Mm-hmm. It's been a while, maybe a little more. I got a series of little injuries that were kind of indicative to me that at my age, my body's ability to heal rapidly enough to just keep going back to the mat, it made me question continuing as a practice. I really, really wanted to be one of those cliched people who stick it out until they get their blue belt and then quit. That was kind of
You
my
were
goal.
close, man.
I was pretty close.
Yeah.
But I kept fucking up my hands and my knee got weird. And the vibe around the gym got a little strange. You know, all props to Ralph Gracie, but his gym got a little weird.
School, man.
It's an intense school, and I was totally for it for a while. But anyway, healing is real, and the speed at which my body heals now is pretty fucking slow. And it made it so that it kind of just wasn't fun, and I started getting more and more protective of not like twisting my fingers and things like that, which made me not fight. It made me just try to avoid injury, which is not a good way to go in jiu-jitsu. And it's not as if I'm someone who is like this age and had been doing it for so long that I could, you know, just dominate the mat and not worry about it. It's like I'm still a fucking white belt and getting the shit beat out of me regularly, and the consequences were very serious every fucking time.
Well, I will say a few things. One, you were pretty good at it. Like I thought you were doing.
I was pretty good. Thank you.
You were doing really well.
Thank you.
And
I discovered for someone who's very invested in nonviolence that when I have an excuse, turns out I'm not so bad at it.
Yeah, I thought your technique was great.
Thank you.
You looked mean while you were doing it. Like you had like some Jason Statham jawline action happening. It was pretty good. And you know, like there are less aggressive schools out there. You know, if you ever decided to get back on the mats.
I might.
For me, like my bicycle injury was significant. Depending on who you talk to, I either overplay it or underplay it. But like I have a metal plate in my arm and collarbone, and it's fucked up. And I had a pretty.
And it's brutal. It's like
and it hurts. It still hurts.
Yeah.
Like, it hurts all the time. And then at the time too, I'd also had like pretty serious concussion. Like in some ways, I feel like I still have some effect from it. And I was just about to go back and COVID fucking happened.
Yeah.
Like Guardian Gym is like 4 blocks from my house. I was like, this is awesome. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to do kickboxing over there and re-up at house and just go hit there before I go to work in the morning. I had my whole schedule set, and then everything got shut down. But house just started reopening, and Guardian Gym just started reopening for like morning classes. So I think I'll be returning to it fairly soon.
I think that this didn't occur to me till just now, but if you and I were into martial arts, but into like bullshit martial arts, injuries wouldn't have affected it. Like if I was
People get hurt doing dumb shit. Like,
yeah, but if we were just like hi-ya and punching air, I wouldn't be worrying about injuries the way I was at Ralph Gracie. Like you do jiu-jitsu, you have people like trying to hurt you. Whereas
they're not really trying to hurt you, but well, maybe
yes, they were.
That's what happens when they're like, "Oh, this guy's got some spirit." Like that's what's cool. I just remember like I broke my toes and I was bartending, you know, and like I was like, "What the fuck am I doing?" You know, doing all the like. If it gets in the way of your money, it's not so great,
right?
But I tell you what, man, if I'm working from home for the rest of my life and I can just sneak off and do whatever, I cannot fucking wait to be like 2 times a day.
That sounds good.
Yeah, it's gonna be
How do you feel about the COVID risk going to a gym though?
I could give a fuck.
What?
I'm super powered. No, I don't know what they do. Like I would go back when they kind of had a handle on it. I think like I don't know exactly what they're doing.
But how are you going to roll with people?
Aggressively. No, I don't know. I mean, I think like one thing I thought that was kind of interesting is like some of them are just doing single person drills, you know? And I think some of those like learning how to do it. I was like, man, if I spent like 3 months, 4 months just learning how to do like get ups really fast or like getting
it's a lot more than doing nothing.
Yeah. Or even just some of the, they have some cool drills that like I tried doing some of them at home and it's just by yourself and your dog's running around in your house. It just doesn't work. But if you had like a coach, I think if you had the like some people will pull the kickboxing bags down and like lay them on the ground and you can do drills where you're scrambling around those.
This is so fun.
Yeah, it's cool. And you know, I think with a coach watching you, you could make progress like that. So I think that's what they're doing right now, and that seems fine to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But get into it, man. It's fucking great.
I think we just talked about jiu-jitsu more than we talked about Great Pumpkin.
Why wouldn't you? It's way more fun than the Peanuts ever were. Look, the only reason why people give a fuck about the Peanuts is because Calvin and Hobbes never became a cartoon. If Calvin and Hobbes had been allowed to go full Garfield, no one would remember Charlie Brown. I'm telling you, would have wiped it off the map.
Shall we leave it there?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Happy Halloween.
Have fun. Oh, fuck. We didn't talk about Matthew McConaughey.